We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie. It's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. It's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she meets a lot of people along the way that make the journey really incredible.
The official trailer to the upcoming Snow White movie finally dropped. And they made a giant mistake in doing so.
What are you, stupid? What's the matter with you? I apologize.
Why? Well, if you go to the teaser, you'll notice the comment section came together to take a giant dump on an already steaming pile of CGI dwarf turds.
What?
And if you go to the trailer, it's more of the same, because the trailer confirms everything people speculated. The CGI is more atrocious than we thought, the narrative has been completely changed to some cringe-worthy, female-empowering story absolutely no one asked for. But you know what? I have to commend Disney though. The absolute, the unmitigated, the humongous balls it takes to go through with this movie is truly admirable, stunning, and brave. I'm just kidding, they're basically stuck with this garbage. They know everyone hates it, and that's why they decided to launch the trailer during the previews for Wicked instead of releasing it on YouTube. Disney would be smart to turn off the comments because I'm sure it'll be more disliked than Piers Morgan's face, his voice, his personality, and just overall presence. I don't know why my mind went to him when I was trying to think of something I can't stand. His face lives rent-free in my head. And as bad as that is, it's still not as bad as this trailer looks. Has a movie ever been met with so much vitriol before its release? Sure, we've seen trailers that looked horrible and the movie ended up being even worse than expected. Joker 2 was a joke, and it was just as bad as that joke I just made. Actually, no. It was worse. It's one of the worst sequels I've ever seen. It was worse than the Blair Witch Project Part 2, and that's crazy seeing as how the first Blair Witch movie sucked. I don't care, I will die on that hill. Logan Paul walking through a forest in Japan was creepier. My point is, we're used to horrible remakes and sequels. We lived through Girl Busters, Fast and Furious 26, so what is making everyone extra spicy when it comes to Snow White in particular? Well, let's start with Snow White, the animated version, and what made it so special. Snow White and the Seven Dwarves is one of the most important films in the history of cinema. This wasn't your typical annual Disney animated blockbuster. No, this was the original Disney animated blockbuster. Snow White and the Seven Dwarves is what set in motion feature-length animations because before 1937, such a thing was unheard of. There was a giant risk in making this movie, but Walt Disney believed in it. Even when no one else did, his own family tried to talk him out of making it. In fact, Snow White was referred to as Disney's folly, and everyone predicted it was going to fail.
I actually started to plan the picture around 1935, and I fooled around with it, trying to get a hold of a story and things for a couple of years, and finally it began to gel. Then I went to work on it, and I finished it the fall of 1938. I didn't know what I had or what would happen or anything. We had the family fortune. We had everything wrapped up in Snow White.
I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, isn't everyone predicting this upcoming live-action Snow White movie to fail? What if it doesn't and it revolutionizes the film industry? Well, here's why you're stupid. I'm kidding. It's actually a fair question, and if anything, trust me, I'm no smarter than you are. But the reason the new movie is predicted to fail isn't the same reason the original Disney animated version was predicted to fail. This movie's predicted to fail because the movie itself is predictable. It's what we've seen from Disney the last few years that audiences have rejected. What we've seen are a lot of poorly written sequels, remakes no one asked for, and feminist narratives that not even feminists want. And the upcoming Snow White is just another pile of junk that can be tossed into one or more of those categories I just mentioned. The original was something new, it was innovative. Walt Disney was taking a risk. You see, prior to this, Walt Disney was known for his Mickey Mouse animations and something called Silly Symphonies, which were animated shorts. Hollywood didn't think Walt Disney was capable of making an animated feature-length film that could keep an audience's attention. And of course, Walt Disney disagreed. He thought there was more to animation than slapstick comedy. And he specifically chose the story of Snow White, which he based on the Brothers Grimm publication of the fairy tale, because he believed through animation he could show comedy, romance, sadness, excitement, and suspense, all by the power of great storytelling. This was Walt Disney's vision. And over the course of 4 years, Walt Disney and his team were able to make a film that would forever change the trajectory of not only Disney, but animation in general. And it did. Snow White, when you adjust for inflation, is the highest grossing animated film of all time. This isn't just some Disney movie. This is the Disney movie. This was Walt Disney's first full-length feature. Without this movie, Disney, the way we know it, doesn't exist. And I think that's what people are missing here. This isn't the same as making a bad remake of a movie like Point Break. It's a lot bigger than that. Without the success of Snow White, there's no Pinocchio, no Bambi, no Cinderella, no Sleeping Beauty, Jungle Book, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Home on the Range, Frozen, and so many others. And yes, Home on the Range actually sucked, but my point is, Snow White has so much historical value, and remaking it with a completely different narrative is a slap in the face to the film industry and to Disney, if that's even possible at this point. I hope the rumors about Walt Disney's body being cryogenically frozen are true. They're not. Because if he isn't, he'd be doing backflips in his grave if he found out what happened to his beloved adaptation of Snow White. From the looks of the trailer and everything we've heard from the stars of the movie, this new version seems like a complete bastardization of what Walt Disney created back in the 1930s. And the number one culprit for shooting this movie right into the ground is none other than Rachel Zegler. I don't know how she managed to accomplish this in such a short amount of time, but somehow she has become one of the most, if not the most, insufferable actor in Hollywood.
And I say actor, not actress, because the word actress is nonsensical.
It's like she goes out of her way to make herself unlikable.
If I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
I'm almost convinced she works for a rival Hollywood studio and was sent to destroy what's left of Disney. I've mentioned this before, but just to touch on a few topics briefly, let's just sidestep the fact Snow White in both the Brothers Grimm version and the Walt Disney animated adaptation is described as having skin as white as snow. And Rachel Zegler is, well, doesn't fit that description. So already, just from the casting, Disney has strayed from the source material. And for what? Diversity? I would almost buy that nonsense if it wasn't for the fact they decided to give the part of the 7 dwarves to CGI. Horrible CGI at that. But more on that in a bit. For now, I want to focus on Rachel Zegler because I think Disney has had it with her. Early in the promotion of the movie, Zegler was on red carpets bashing the original Snow White.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
And letting us know the new version is going to be some empowering female figure that doesn't need saving.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
And even alluded to the male lead having all of his lines cut and just being entirely scrapped from the whole movie.
All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
Can you imagine your co-star saying that about you? Like, can you imagine just being at work with someone and them telling everyone on a Zoom call they might fire you, they might not, and that it didn't really matter because your role at work wasn't important anyway? I mean, your role at work probably isn't important, but that's beside the issue. In the newest trailer, Snow White isn't some dainty princess. She's a girl boss. I hate that I'm using that term in 2024, but here we are, and let's be honest. This whole narrative reeks of something that was written back in the late 2010s. And that's because it was. And in the movie, she's gonna take down the matriarchy? Wait, what? Yeah, that's right. We're not gonna let some woman take over the kingdom. I feel like Disney has had to pull Rachel Zegler to the side and tell her to cut back on some of the anti-Snow White rhetoric because she was getting a ton of backlash that obviously turned into negative press for the movie. And if there's one thing Disney likes more than pushing agendas, it's money. I'm sure this isn't the only time Disney's had to have words with her, because recently she went on a political rant against people that voted for Trump when she said she didn't want any of them to know peace, only to come back and apologize for it.
Zegler is now apologizing. She writes in a new post, "I let my emotions get the best of me, and I am sorry, contributed to the negative discourse."
I don't understand what goes through the mind of someone like that who's trying to promote a film. It's one thing to endorse a candidate and even be upset if they lose, but to come out and tell half the country you don't want them to have any peace when your employer needs to make like $400 million just to break even on a movie is completely asinine. Because in the words of Michael Jordan, Republicans buy sneakers too. Sneakers in this case would be movie tickets for anyone that didn't catch that. And for those wondering what I'm talking about, Michael Jordan made the infamous comment, "Republicans buy sneakers too," when he was asked why he wouldn't endorse a Democratic candidate in North Carolina, but that's a story for another day. Speaking of the 90s, let's not pretend this is just a kids movie. It's not. It's marketing towards kids and millennials. More specifically, it's targeted towards millennials with kids that want to share something from their childhood with their offspring. It's nostalgia bait. It's aimed at that little girl or boy who grew up in the 90s during the Disney Golden Era, when all these animated films hit VHS and were adored all over the world. To say that this is aimed purely at kids is absolute nonsense. The 2019 Lion King remake is one of the top 10 highest grossing films of all time. Anyone that saw that knows it didn't hold up to the original, which is the only reason it raked in that much money. In fact, the whole reason we keep getting sequels and remakes, not just from Disney, but from every studio, is because they're cash cows. They're banking on the fact that people want to relive their childhood for a couple hours. I promise you, kids weren't sitting at home begging their parents to take them to go see the 2019 Lion King remake. They're perfectly content watching YouTube. They didn't care about seeing a CGI remake any more than they care about seeing the awful CGI in Snow White. And it is awful. When the teaser came out, we got a glimpse of how bad the CGI might be, but it's even worse than that. This movie is just so stupid looking. Real actors mixed with animated animals, and even worse, animated dwarves. This is the stuff of nightmares. My nephew can draw better than this, and his pictures suck. What? They do. But he's a child. This was made by a studio that was given a budget of over $300 million. And the craziest part is they didn't hire actual dwarves because they thought it would be too offensive to the dwarfism community. Are you listening to what I'm saying? This is insanity. They refused to hire dwarves and pay them to act in a Disney film because they thought it would be less offensive to just CGI them into the film instead. This is complete lunacy.
What the hell is even that?
They went so out of their way to appease a group of people that they ended up making something way more offensive. It's horseshoe theory, once again being proven correct.
Well, if they want to make it right, they redo the movie and they recast. Okay. And they get Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
But hey, at least we got the girl boss everyone wanted. Well, actually, that's the thing. Nobody asked for this. Feminists weren't even asking for this, and honestly, things like this probably end up hurting the feminist movement in the long run. Having someone as unlikable as Rachel Zegler be the face of a project that's gonna cost hundreds of millions of dollars is just a complete disaster. Snow White in the animated version wasn't some weak little dainty princess that needed saving. She was graceful, she was kind, she was warm. She just had this perfect essence about her, and that's why we loved her, because that is how Walt Disney envisioned her. This new film is stripping all of that away, and for what? To try and convince us that Gal Gadot is jealous of Rachel Zegler's beauty? How is that even believable? Or is the fairest of them all supposed to represent beauty from within? Because knowing everything we know about Rachel Zegler from interviews, tweets, and red carpet events, there doesn't seem to be anything to be envious of. Disney just doesn't get it. They keep shooting themselves in the foot. It's like they're doing it deliberately. Most people are over it at this point and just want Disney to fail. I'm probably in the minority here. I want them to succeed, I really do. Why? Well, because they bought up so much intellectual property, they almost have a monopoly on movies, and if that's going to be the case, I want them to be good. Who doesn't want to see a good Star Wars film, good Marvel films, so on and so forth? I do. And that's why it's so disheartening when they go out of their way to ruin classics like they're about to do with Snow White. Because if they can't have any reverence for the most important film in the history of the company, how are we ever going to trust they get anything right? Look, I know I'm being way too optimistic here, but I think there's a small part of me deep down inside that still wants to believe in some of that old Disney magic.